Hello, this is Brett Latham, and welcome back to Lathanomics. Today, we're going to continue in microeconomics. We're going to talk about firm costs. Okay, costs are a little bit tougher, a little bit trickier, but we'll get through them. Okay, with cost, we have fixed cost. We talk about the short run versus the long run, and we have sunk costs. We're going to talk about all of these things. Got a little example here where Ernst & Young is talking about leaving the Sears Tower, which it used to be called, and they accounted for 19% of their revenues, and it has their largest tenants and all that good stuff. Just to let you know, back in the day, not too long ago, about 20 years ago, Latham actually worked right there in the Sears Tower. He worked for Sears corporate office. So I was down here. The senior executives, they were like way up here somewhere, but they had it good, like 470 or something like that. But they had it nice. But this tower, it's like Ernst & Young, when their lease, normally the lease is a fixed cost, because you have to keep paying it. So in the long run, however, what's going to happen to the lease? Well, it's going to expire, and it'll become variable, okay? But in the short run, generally it's fixed. Well, here it's getting to that point where the long run and the short run are converging, okay? And so they're going to make a new decision whether or not they want to do it. This probably should be a separate sheet of paper from the other paper you normally take notes on, because we're going to do a memory quiz. First thing I want you to do is pause the video and draw the cost curves. This is marginal cost, average total cost, average variable cost. Then we'll have cost per unit and quantity. So pause the video, draw this nice clear drawing, and these 2 points are the minimums. So the curve comes down, it hits a minimum, it goes back up, down, hits a minimum, goes back up. That you're going to have to memorize. I'm going to say draw it, and you're going to have to draw this. So that's part of your memory quiz. Pause, draw. Moving on, okay? Now, the rest of the memory quiz. Okay, so you're going to fill these in. I'm going to give you the black. Everything in black on this sheet, I give you. Everything that's not in black, you give me, okay? So up here, I can put ATC, average total cost, equals average fixed cost plus average variable cost, or it also equals total cost divided by the quantity, okay? Average fixed cost equals fixed cost divided by quantity, okay? The name, what's the name of you're going to have ATC, you're going to write average total cost. AFC, average fixed cost. MR, marginal revenue. MC, marginal cost. MPL, marginal product of labor. AVC, average variable cost. You're going to have to write all those things. Okay, you're going to fill in this. What's ATC? MC equals ATC. These are the minimums. Okay, where do they hit the minimum? Where does AVC hit the minimum? Where marginal cost equals AVC. Where does ATC hit its minimum? Where marginal cost equals ATC. Yeah, AVC, I got it. Okay, name, average variable cost, right? That's the first time. Curve shapes, marginal cost, looks like a swoosh. A swoosh, okay? It decreases due to specialization. It increases due to diminishing marginal returns. We're going to talk about these things as we go along. AVC and ATC are U-shaped. AFC declines rapidly, then flattens due to the spreading effect, okay? So get all that down, pause the video, make sure you have it all down nice and neat, because you're going to have to regurgitate this to me with only the things in black for you to give me the things both in red and in blue. So pause in writing, and we'll be back. And we're back. Okay. In the short run, they're fixed inputs, okay? We always have over a short period of time, we have fixed inputs, okay? So the short run, total cost of production in the short run, total cost equals variable cost plus fixed cost. That's part of the memory quiz, right? You have that down. The marginal cost of production is the additional cost of producing one unit. In other words, if I already have a pizza oven, that's a fixed cost. If I want to produce one more pizza, that's a variable cost. I don't need to buy another oven. I just need to, but I do need to buy the ingredients and I need to pay the person to make it, okay? So those are marginal cost. And that's the change in total cost divided by change in quantity, and that's once again on your memory quiz. Okay, marginal cost, this was on your memory quiz, right? It initially declines due to specialization. Think about it. You know, think of a Domino's pizza, right? There's not one person working there. Why not? Because that one person would have to take the order, go back, get the pizza prepared. They'd have to do a lot of different stuff. They probably wouldn't be very efficient. When you bring a second person in, one person can kind of do the front office and take care of the little things, and then another person can do the cooking. Well, they specialize and become more efficient. Maybe even a third person would be even better because then you could split up the back office duties. So a front office person, then a person kind of getting the pizzas ready and preparing them, another person kind of cooking them, finishing them up. But pretty soon, if you walk into a Domino's, there's not very many employees. Why? Because once you get over this specialization benefit, well then you have diminishing returns to reductions. Think about it. What if you had 100 people working in a Domino's? Well, first of all, they're not very big. And so it's going to be super crowded. They're going to be in each other's way. Most of them aren't going to have anything to do, so they're going to start bugging the people that do have work to do. Hey, man, what'd you do last night? You know, it's like, hey, you want to go somewhere tonight? And it's like, hey, dude, I got to get my work done. So you have diminishing returns pretty quickly in most instances, but in all instances, eventually you have diminishing returns to production because how many pizza ovens do we have? Just one, okay? And so we end up with diminishing returns as we add more variable input or people. Okay, per unit average cost, just dividing, right? You just take whatever your cost is, divide it by quantity. So my costs are $1,000 a month. I make 100 pizzas. Well, 1,000 divided by 100 would be $10 per pizza. That would be my total cost, okay? Average variable cost, well, of my $1,000 I spend in pizza, okay, 400 of it is rent for the oven and stuff like that. Well, that's a fixed cost, and then you add the variable cost, and the variable cost would be the things other than the oven or the rent or whatever. And then we have the marginal cost curve intersects both the other curves at their minimums, and we wrote that, and we'll get into it some more. Okay, now, these are things I want you to write. In the short run, there's variable inputs and at least one fixed input. That's the definition of the short run, okay? Something's fixed, be it rent, the cost of your manager, the cost of the pizza oven, something, at least one thing there might be fixed, and there might be a number of things that are fixed, okay? And so you have to pay the fixed cost no matter what. If you want to have a Domino's pizza, you gotta have a building, you gotta have pizza ovens and stuff like cash registers, things like that. Those are all fixed cost, okay? And the definition of fixed cost are cost whose total does not vary, okay? Whether I produce one pizza or 1,000 pizzas, same fixed cost. Now, ultimately, if I want to grow, maybe I need 2 ovens. But even then, once you get 2 ovens, now the 2 ovens are your fixed cost. So when we look at it from an economic standpoint, we have fixed cost. So make sure you have that written down. That's important. Okay, variable cost are those that change. If I'm not going to make a pizza, I don't need the bread, I don't need the sauce, I don't need the meat, okay? So don't, the variable costs are the ones you only spend if you're going to use them. In fact, at Domino's, they keep their stuff in the back in a refrigerator, freezer, whatever, and it's like they don't have to use them today. They could save them till tomorrow. When do they use them? When they actually have to make a pizza. When is the oven there? Every day, no matter what. At night it's there. In the morning it's there. Whether it's being used or not, you have to pay for it. It's fixed. And the total cost, you just add the two together. My fixed cost plus my variable cost. Okay. Why are the costs even with no output? Well, that's what we just said, right? What happens if Domino's doesn't have any electricity that day? How many pizzas do they make? Answer is 0. Do they still have cost? Yes. Those costs are fixed. Okay? So right here, instead of starting at 0 units, $0, we started here at $400 because in this case, our example's $400 in fixed cost. Figure 55-1, or point 1, you might want to take a look at that. and kind of just read about, because it may help you better understand. Okay, marginal cost, change in total cost divided by the change in output. Remember marginal revenue, same thing, right? Change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. This is change in total cost, change in quantity. Once again, 1, 1, 1, 1. So you don't really have to divide it by anything, but your cost that's 0 units. But if I want to make 1 unit, my fixed cost is $108 for 0 units, right? There's 0 units. Still $108 no matter what. My variable costs only go up for each unit I produce. And you can see they go up by, different, varying amounts, right? 12, 48, 60, 84, and so on. They keep going up. Okay, this is a little depiction of it. Here's total cost. Here's marginal cost. Not quite as important. I don't know that you need to draw these two. I wouldn't worry about it. You might want to look at the figure just to help it make sense to it. But anytime you see one of these graphs, theoretically, there's something like this behind it to create the graph. Even though we just kind of draw graphs without necessarily using these numbers, realize in the real world there is numbers behind these things to create the graphs. Okay, figure 55.2, once again, take a look at that. One thing that I want you to make a note of, though, is marginal cost. This graph is the short-run supply curve. In other words, I'm going to supply up to what my cost is. So I would produce, like in this case, the cost is $200. Well, if I can sell something for $200, I'll produce all the way to here. I won't produce the one that costs $225 or $250 because I'm not going to spend $225 in order to get $200. So that's marginal cost equals supply, and that'll come into play numerous times over the next couple of months. Okay, one thing I want you to note, and these you've already written these down in your memory quiz, but when we use the word average, okay, well, all it means is divide by quantity. Average, divide by quantity. Average, divide by quantity. Average, divide by quantity, right? Per unit average, okay? And then total cost, total cost. Variable cost, variable cost. Fixed cost, fixed cost. In other words, they're all the same. It's not that complicated, okay? Just if you can remember the basics, you can put these together, and then this is just the two derivations of that formula. You can present it two different ways, so that makes sense. Hopefully you math people, it's like super easy. This is pre-algebra, by the way. It's not real complicated math, but it's out there. Not super important to know this, but we want to know it here so we can use it, we can apply it and get used to it a little bit. Okay, here's just an example, right? Our total cost is $1,000, which is comprised of fixed costs, like the pizza oven of $400, variable costs, like pizza ingredients, labor, stuff like that, is $600 if we produce 100 units, okay? Well then, our average fixed cost, $400 divided by 100 units is $4. Our variable cost, $600 divided by 100 units is $6. If you notice, if I only produced one pizza, what would be my fixed cost? Would be $400. I need to sell that pizza for over $400 just to break even. If I produce 2 pizzas, it goes down to $200. If I produce 4 pizzas, it goes down to $100. In other words, at very low levels, my fixed cost plummets. But once I get to higher levels, if I go from 100 units to, let's say, 110 units, well, my cost is only going to go down a little bit. So as you get enough units, your fixed cost stops decreasing very much. But at very low levels, it decreases really rapidly. Okay, and okay, we're going to talk about average total cost, and notice it's kind of U-shaped here. This is average total cost. You don't need to draw that. But I do want to cover a couple of things. Okay, let's go. Okay, average fixed cost always declines, right? The more units, the cost is fixed, we divide by a bigger number. Okay, at first it drops rapidly due to the spreading. Okay, we're talking about average total cost. Average total cost drops readily because of fixed cost and the spreading effect. That's the 400 divided by 1, 400 divided by 2 is 200, 400 divided by 4 is 100. Like, it's fixed costs going down really quickly, changing much more than variable costs are changing. And so we end up with average total cost, this U shape, going down like this, primarily due to the spreading effect of fixed cost. Well, eventually, this kind of levels out. A fixed cost curve kind of looks like this, and then it really gets really flat. Okay? Once it levels out, well, then we have diminishing returns. In other words, if you keep adding labor, it's not going to benefit you that much. Domino's adds a fourth person. Well, that person may help some. A fifth person, boy, that person really is starting to get marginal. 6, 7, 8. Pretty soon they may actually be hurting. And so as you add more people, your costs go back up. Okay? So they come down, spreading effect of fixed cost. They go back up because of diminishing returns. So make sure you have those two things down, okay? Pause the video, write them, get them down. Okay, this is the same thing kind of repeated and shown here. Maybe this helps you a little better to understand it, look at it. And this is table 55.2, figure 55.3. That might help by looking at those in the book, reading about them a little bit. They may help you better understand this. Okay, now, marginal cost, so write this down. This is really important. Marginal cost always intersects average variable cost and average total cost at their minimums. Okay, we're gonna get into that a little bit more on the next slide or two. Okay, now marginal cost, not fixed cost. Marginal cost can initially fall due to specialization. And we talked about that briefly at the beginning. Remember, Domino's, one person, well, they got to do the front, they got to get all the food, they got to put the pizzas together, they got to cook the pizzas, they got to box them, they got to give them to the customer and all, take the money, all of that stuff. That's not very efficient. Yet a second person, one can do the back, the other can do the front. A third person, maybe they can split up the chores in the back and even be more efficient. That's specialization. So marginal cost starts off, it falls due to specialization. Remember, we're talking about marginal cost now. Okay? But as we hire more labor, we have diminishing marginal returns. And that's when we add that fifth, sixth, seventh, whatever, wherever it works, where it ends up, instead of being better off, you can't specialize anymore, you specialized all you can, you actually end up worse off because they don't have as much to do. They can't, we still only have one piece of it. Okay? We still only have one piece of it. Okay? Here's an example of the cost going up and it meeting. As long as costs are low, this brings this down. When they get high, it brings it back up, right? If this is 100 and this is only 40, if you add 40 into a bunch of hundreds, it brings the average down below 100. You know that from your test grades, right? And then if you get your, let's say your test average goes all the way down to 60 and you make it 80 on your next test, well, then your average is going to start coming back up. That's an important concept, one that frequently gets asked. Look at figure 55.5, and it'll help you maybe to better understand that, take maybe a little bit better notes. Okay, now here's the example, and this is what you drew, okay? In your memory quiz, you drew this. Marginal cost starts going down, comes back up, and keeps going up like that. That's marginal cost. Average variable cost, so excluding the fixed cost, it goes down because marginal cost is going down. It meets, and then marginal cost pulls it back up. And then total cost includes fixed cost. So initially, there's this big gap between fixed cost and total cost because fixed cost per small unit is really high. But then as you get over here, and you've already spread the fixed cost pretty much, that difference gets much smaller. Okay, but that's what it looks like, and the key point here is the minimums. Okay, this is what we talked about, okay, so maybe make sure, it's like, does all of this make sense to you? If you need to, pause it, take a quick look. It's like, yeah, I got that in my notes. All of this should be in your notes, either in your memory quiz or what you've done. And let's see if we can answer a few simple questions here. Okay, firms producing zero outputs, total cost equals zero, right? So answer that question. And it's like, no, right? They equal the fixed cost. We have fixed costs no matter what. We had to buy the pizza oven, we had to pay the rent, or we couldn't even open the business, regardless of whether we operate the business or not. Number two, which is true? So you've got true, false, 3 true, false. Pause the video, answer the questions. Okay, marginal cost is the change in total cost generated by one additional unit of output. Yeah, that's it, right? Change in total cost, because fixed costs don't change, so it's really the change in variable cost, but it's also the change in total cost. That's true. Marginal cost is the change in variable cost generated by, that's what we just said, right? So the change in total cost and the change in variable cost are identical. So they're both true. Marginal cost curve must cross the minimum of the average total cost curve, right? Always the minimum, average total cost curve, not total cost, average total cost curve. They're all true. Those are just important facts you need to know. Which of the following is correct? Pause the video, answer the question. That's long enough. Okay, average variable cost is the change in total cost. It's not, that's marginal, right? It's not change. Average is average, not change. Marginal cost equals total, no, this is average, right? When you divide by quantity, you're getting an average, so it's not a marginal. The average cost curve crosses at the minimum of the marginal, no, that's kind of backwards, right? The marginal cost crosses at the minimum, yeah, it's backwards, so that's not true. Average fixed curve slopes upward, not slopes downward. So consequently, if E isn't correct, we're in trouble, okay? Average variable cost is the average total cost minus the average fixed cost. That's true because we know that average total cost equals average variable cost plus average fixed cost. So that's just, they're just doing a little pre-algebra on us. Moving on. The slope of the total cost curve equals, oh, this one we didn't cover, but think about it. What's the slope of the curve? One of those answers is correct, and it's like super obvious if you think about it, or if you're in calculus A, B, or C. And the answer is marginal cost, right? So in the real world, you get one of those calculus people to calculate your slope and tell you about your cost and how you can operate your business. And that really actually happens, especially in manufacturing companies. Marginal cost curve is, actually it is ugly and it looks like a chicken, but no, it's not, okay? So pick between A through D. It's not a demand curve. It's actually not a market curve at all, okay? Market curve, supply and demand, right? That's supply and demand. That's a market. It's not a market curve. The firm's short-run demand curve. Now, the firm really doesn't have a demand curve. The firm has a supply curve. So that leaves us with D. The firm's short, right? MC equals supply over certain ranges. And we'll cover that a little bit later in the course. Okay? And so that's it for this section. So this is Mr. Latham signing out. We'll see you next time.